Hello and welcome one and all. You're listening to Totally Connected, your window into New Zealand's tech frontier, brought to you by Entelar Group, the Total Connection company. I'm Jonathan Cotton, and today we're joined by HR expert Amy Gregory. Amy is Head of People and Culture at Entelar and the driver behind Entelar's wide-ranging diversity and inclusion initiatives. Now, as we all know, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, there can be a wide gap between good intentions and genuine organisational change. Increasingly, we're realising that it's less about those box-ticking exercises or simply hiring more women, so to speak, and more about examining what it actually means to prioritise diversity in the workplace. It's more about fostering the right mindset, and it's about commitment to improving outcomes across the organisation. So there's a lot to talk about here, so let's get into it. Let's take a look at how Entelar is navigating this nuanced terrain, what it's doing to foster diverse thinking and inclusion across the organisation, and what we can all do to champion diversity in a way that creates practical, real-world positive change in the places we work and in the industry at large. Hi Amy, thanks for joining us.
Hi Jonathan, it's great to be here.
Fantastic to have you, Amy. I've really been looking forward to this. Now, you've got a pretty substantial background in HR and technology. Maybe we can start with a little bit about your history, how you got into the industry and what attracted you to HR in the first place.
Yeah, so my HR career started just under 20 years ago. I started in a software development company, a global tech company. And actually, I've worked in a few different tech companies over the years, as well as professional services and construction. So I do lead our people and culture function at Entelar Group. And I guess, my passion is around supporting our leaders and team members and helping them achieve their strategic and operational goals while making sure we balance the risk, when it comes to people and safety. I think fundamentally, I'm someone who cares deeply about people and their individual journeys and stories. And I really enjoy, getting to know people and exploring their strengths and opportunities and helping them sort of unlock that, through the business. I really take the time to know others for the opportunities and the strengths they bring.
Yeah, it's a hugely unique industry, isn't it? Especially in technology. And I guess, one of the big questions, the big question that we're here to talk about today is, in 2024, what is the state of inclusion and diversity in the tech industry from your point of view?
I mean, we've seen international commitments to advance gender equality, and that's certainly brought about improvements in some areas. But I think the sad truth is that the degree of improvement has been disappointing. If we look locally, New Zealand Tech's most recent digital skills Aotearoa report found that only 24% of people leaving tertiary with a tech qualification are female. And within the tech industry itself, the stats are slightly better at 29% female, but still well below what we would hope. And that's the difficulty that we're battling with, is we're just not seeing the people come out from school and university study and, having that aspiration of a career in tech. And some of these, some of the causes relate to deep-rooted issues. I think, firstly, gender stereotypes can play a pervasive role, from women opting out of career progression opportunities because they might take a leading role in childcare at home, or the view that, an ambitious woman with a point of view is bossy, whereas maybe her male peer is seen as assertive,
right. Yeah.
A lot of this stuff starts at home and, is like I say, it's deep-rooted. I think the pivotal moment for me to seeing the change that was needed was becoming a mum. And I think, I came from a work ethic where I was often the first in, the last out, and all of a sudden I had this really compelling reason to be somewhere else. And beyond the desire...
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and beyond the desire to be there for my kids, there were those various logistical challenges, with daycare operating hours, and you just had to be there to pick them up, right?
Yeah.
And then kids' illness. And so thinking personally, what I needed at that point in my career was flexibility. I had external demands on my time. And, I needed that flexibility to consider where and when I got the job done. And absolutely you get the job done. And when you've got someone who's got that really compelling reason to be somewhere else, you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to put the commitment in. But I think that, that's been a key consideration in our approach to diversity at Entelar Group. Thinking about what role we can adapt to enable flexibility. There are some roles that are difficult to adapt. We have a lot of people out in the field on the side of the road, digging trenches, and those types of roles need to be done within the constraints of what we've agreed with council or customers. So there's less opportunity. So we have to think about the low-hanging fruit and the opportunities that are there, because there are a lot of roles that we can. And I think that's the key to attracting and retaining women, who often do play a lead role in running the household at home.
Yeah, yeah. So Entelar's sort of made this public commitment regarding diversity. How did it get on the radar? Is it those sort of troubling industry stats from NZ Tech, or is it something else?
Oh, look, absolutely. Diversity and inclusion is a strategic imperative for us at Entelar Group. When we established Entelar Group in October 2022, we realised, there's a lot of work to do to create change. We were doing well in cultural diversity, but we needed to create that sort of impetus for change to really improve our gender representation across the business. We formed Entelar Group through bringing together 3 different companies. And so we inherited people from, existing roles. And when we looked at that gender diversity, it was extremely low. We're a technology services company, so we've got workers across distribution, trade, infrastructure, construction, and service industries. And many of these areas do have historically low levels of female participation. So we understand the challenge, and there'll be many other businesses out there with, facing into a similar issue.
Yeah, yeah. With International Women's Day recently, we've seen lots of companies, speaking about this. Entelar's, really committing to this. What exactly is underway? How's it going?
Yeah, I think, we've started with our leadership team. We're committed to being the change we want to see. We're aware that if we don't do something now, we'll be in the same place in 1 to 2 years' time. I think one of our core objectives is to ensure that people can realise their full potential, regardless of difference, and making sure that we do build a workforce that reflects the communities in which we operate. We know it will take some brave decisions. I think it's, a combination of short-term action and longer-term initiatives. And the key thing is pushing the boundaries of what good looks like. I think oftentimes we look at experience, but if we look for experience, we're going to come up with the same challenge. Because we just don't have the people looking for jobs with experience in a lot of our areas. So we need to think outside the square in terms of, maybe there are complementary skills that someone could bring to a position that, is equally as important, and then learn the trade. And that's what we're looking at now.
Yeah, yeah. Often when the subject comes up, it's often thought of as, well, it's simply a case of just hiring more women, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that, isn't it? It's more about sort of changing the organisational mindset than simply tweaking hiring practices.
Oh, absolutely. I think I listened to a podcast myself, but it's called Building Belonging. And Sean Miles was on this podcast from Entelar Consulting Group, and he described it as being, at the essence, changing the hearts and minds of how systems operate. I think, you definitely need a foundation of policies and regulations, but, the way he described it, it's about lifting the hood and thinking about how your systems might be causing harm, and then doing the necessary work to alleviate that. There are definitely forces against that movement, and you see that galvanise once you sort of mark this as a priority. But it's part of the journey that you've got to lean into those challenges and be steadfast and committed to the cause. And that's ultimately how we've approached it at Entelar Group. We started with a very open discussion with our senior leadership team and asked that question, are we all aligned? Some had different perspectives of what that end goal might look like, and also the journey to get there. So we talked that through, we really unpacked that. And once we had that SLT agreement, we took it to our wider leader group. And we ran a bit of a privilege walk exercise. So we had everyone standing in a line in the middle of the room, and we asked them to step forward or back, depending on their life experience. So, whether they had grown up where English wasn't their first language, or whether they had someone in their wider family group who had any addiction challenges, or, and as we asked more and more questions, there was a distinct difference between some people standing at the front of the room and some at the back of the room. And that really sparked some good discussion around the various forms of privilege and appreciating the diversity of backgrounds in the room, and how nuanced it is. It's certainly not just about gender. That's one of the things we're going after first. Our next stage is to run a workshop with our people leaders and getting them to agree our priorities as a collective group, being really clear on our why. And like I said before, getting into the sort of hearts and minds. And I think ultimately, the plan of action needs to start with consideration for where you are now. So if your company isn't as diverse and inclusive as you'd like to be, you have to think about why that is, and it might include consideration for why people leave, understanding the views and perspectives of people within the company, thinking about where biases might be built in, and that's where those systems that I talked about earlier come in, and thinking about inequities and REM recruitment promotion opportunities. So you've got to consider the environment you have, once the women arrive in a male dominant team as well, and consider whether you've set up sufficient support so that they don't just succeed, but they feel like they truly belong.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the other day when you and I were talking, you said something I liked. You mentioned the idea of brave spaces rather than safe spaces. Could you tell us a little bit more about sort of Entelar's approach to creating these brave spaces and how that might foster sort of more diverse thinking within the organisation?
Yeah, so in the world of diversity and inclusion, it's common to hear people mention the importance of creating safe spaces. And I guess that's where people can show up as their authentic self in a psychologically safe environment. That safe environment affirms their identity. And that's absolutely important. It's a wonderful first step. But when we're in the situation we're in and we've got the stagnated progress, what we really need is a brave space. And in those brave spaces, people are prepared to exist in discomfort. They're courageous and they, might challenge the status quo. I don't think safe spaces are enough to really make meaningful progress. Because like I say, the opposition will galvanise. And it might be that in these brave spaces, someone feels hurt or offended by something that someone says or does. But the environment allows the parties to exist and work through that discomfort and navigate that journey together. So it's, I guess, calling on the majority group members to learn more about the experiences of minorities and learning more about ways they can personally promote a culture that supports growth for all.
Yeah, yeah. So in Entelar, you hear the phrase a lot, representation, representation matters. So are there key sort of female mentors or leaders at Entelar who are sort of leading this charge with you, Amy?
Yeah, we've got a great woman in infrastructure group that has been key in leading out on this for us as a business. I've been really impressed with the way they've self-formed. They're passionate people who really believe in this. And, it's not only women. We've got really good representation, across the business. And they're really committed to raising awareness and increasing the number of women working in the infrastructure and technology industries. So they started off with an incredible launch event late last year. And that was attended by internal and external speakers and members of Entelar Group, team members of Entelar Group, as well as some external potential candidates. So we had great presentations around the journeys of, people who have, bridged that gap in a tough industry for women, as well as we had a bit of a careers fair. So opportunities for our people to learn about different areas of the business that they could cross over to. Maybe they're in an office-based role that's well represented and there's an opportunity to move into a different area of the business. They've also taken a lead on International Women's Day events. They're making a real positive difference on practical things. So ensuring we have women's sizing for shirts and PPE. And they're also building key partnerships with organisations such as Girls in High Vis. And, that's an organisation that gives female students an opportunity to gain hands-on experience and hear from women in the civil and telecommunications industry. So this group is doing a lot of great work. And I think they've become that sort of guiding light, for people in the business who want someone to look up to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Hey, and I suppose one of the really important questions here is what can men bring to the table in these sorts of initiatives? What should the males in the organisations be doing to help these types of programs succeed?
Yeah, look, I think, we've got a business that is predominantly male. So we need that buy-in from the men in the business to understand the importance of this. And when they make hiring decisions, make sure that they're bought into it. So that's why we're having that wider leadership group workshop to make sure that, we all agree what our standards are and that, whenever we make a decision that could allow bias to slip in, that they front foot that and, consider all the various measures of success before promoting or hiring someone.
Yeah, nicely put. So you've got these ambitious goals and you're completely committed to achieving them, which is fantastic. But how is success actually measured here? Are there specific data points that you're aiming for, or is it more nebulous than that?
Yeah, so for us, we've got an aspiration of 40-40-20. So that's 40% male, 40% female, and 20% of any gender. I think, it's important to have that sort of aspiration very clear. I think, we're sitting at 20% female at the moment, so there's still work to do. We're bringing on more females than we're seeing leave the business, so we're definitely heading in the right direction, but we can't be complacent. And I think, there's a lot of work to do, as I said earlier, both in the short term and in the long term. So we're running empathy interviews with our female team members to understand their experience and ensure that we act on things that will make a difference for them to stay. We're also using insights from our exit interviews to ensure that we learn from our leaders, and then thinking about the various standards to provide the guardrails for decision making. So for recruitment and selection, we ensure that we've got a female interviewer on every panel. We've taken a look at our advertising to ensure that we use inclusive language to attract a broader range of diverse talent. And we actually partnered with one of our Women in Infrastructure members. It's a team member who's also a chapter lead down in Wellington. And he talked us through an exploration a discussion he had with his wife, where essentially took the advertisement to her and sort of got her feedback. And, her view is that doesn't lead out on all the things that are important to me as a woman. And actually what's important to me as a woman is seeing the flexibility up front in the ad, seeing the ways in which you can help me manage my life and work. And so we changed that advert, and then all of a sudden we had a major increase in the female applications, and we were able to hire a female for that position, which fundamentally was a role very, very predominantly led by men. So I think, we're doing lots of different things. It's a multifaceted approach, but you've got to give things a go, and I think that's fundamentally what we've learned. You might have a crack at something and it might not work, but you've got to try, because if you don't try, you're going to be in the same position in a year, 2 years' time.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory to some degree, isn't it? So there's an amount of experimentation that has to happen. Hey, just while we're on the subject of exit interviews, what kind of things have surfaced there? Are there reoccurring themes that you're coming across? What seems to be the important issues for people who happen to be leaving? Surfaced out of that?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've learned through exit interviews is you can't just go guns blazing and hire a bunch of females into a role where you've got a system that doesn't support it. And so in our context, as I said earlier, we've got people on the side of the road. They're out on rotation for 2 to 3 weeks. They're living in a motel. There has to be consideration for, is there a portaloo on the side of the road? Right. Are we making sure we've got enough support? Do we have enough of a critical mass of women, before they're, staying in these motels with a predominantly male team? And I've seen, other organisations do some great things in creating all female teams as an example. And that's our next priority is thinking about what needs to be true to, create, an all female team, in one area of the business, just to give it a go. We're trying a bunch of different things. We also have a partnership with Limited Service Volunteers. So that is a program run by the Ministry of Social Development, and it's a free 6-week program for young people who might not be studying or working. So it's run by the Defence Force, and it supports young people to build their confidence and skills to get work ready and make a fresh start in life. And on the course, they've got support for life skills, learning the importance of discipline through a schedule and routine. And they also support with those employment connections at the end. So we went to a careers fair with the program and sort of highlighted our opportunities to some of these cadets. And then we took on 2 rigor interns through this partnership, and one of those was female. So, we're hoping to build on that in the future. But again, as I said earlier, it's fundamentally giving things a go. We're trying it with 2. We're seeing how that's going. But, giving things a go. Otherwise, you'll never see, you'll never be the change you want to see in the workplace.
Wow. There's lots on the go at Entelar, obviously. So for people who are listening here, what are some ways that other organisations can help develop a more diverse talent pipeline into their organisations, and into the industry?
I think, coming together to, I guess, deal with the challenges that we face as an industry is really powerful, because we're all facing the same challenge. So there's no need to sort of go it alone. I think the more we all come together, because a lot of these longer term actions require those partnerships early with schools and, polytechs and universities. And as an industry group, if we address that together, we'll have more chance of success.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking to those educational institutions, what's the response like? Are they ready to engage? Are they on board with what you're describing?
Yeah, absolutely. We find actually it's more the community groups that we've had a lot of success with. So we've got people who are linked into churches and various community groups, and talking about the aspiration. And, like I said before, in terms of the Women in Infrastructure Group Careers Fair, people invited their friends, just through connections like that. But once they came along and saw the aspiration and the passion and the commitment from the business, they were in. We had so many people coming up to us sharing their keenness to join the company. I think it's just making those connections. And, it's not just the typical university fairs. A lot of people at university have already figured out where they want to go. We want to tap into people that are still deciding, at that earlier stage, whether it's at school, polytech, or through other connections. But we do find, it's well received. I think the questions they have is, what is the support for me once I get there? And that's why that's been so important in framing up our approach to this, making sure that we've got that support mechanism for training and that guidance, having someone stand alongside them as they learn. There was one role where we actually made the decision not to hire a female, because it was a role sitting on its own in a remote area, and there just wouldn't be that support in place. And the last thing we want to do is put a female into a position and not have that support in place to help her grow and learn, if she doesn't have experience in the craft. So we actually decided to bring a female into a Wellington team, which was a larger team, so she can learn and grow alongside that support.
Wonderful, wonderful. A lot going on at Entelar, a really multi-pronged approach, isn't it?
It absolutely is, yeah, and it has to be.
Yeah. So what's in the pipeline now? What's next for you and this initiative?
Yeah, as I say, the getting the wider leader group all on board and creating those plans for each area of the business, because it is unique to the area of the business that it sits within. Some areas are able to have more flexibility than others, and then making sure we've got both the short and long-term plans for each area. Once we've got the wider leadership on board, we'll continue to drive it with the general employee group. We talk about this at every senior leadership meeting, at every wider leader group meeting. But I think the key thing that we've noticed is, given we haven't progressed as quickly as we would like, I think we need some really core commitments that we all live up to every day. We will not make a hiring decision without ensuring we've considered the top female for that role, as an example. So we're doubling down on what those commitments are at the moment.
Good stuff. Hey, that's a wrap, folks. Thank you, Amy, for joining us to talk about what's happening at Entelar. And thank you, too, to our listeners for tuning in. If you like what you've heard here, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and drop us a line with your feedback, topic ideas, or anything else you'd like to get off your chest. I'm Jonathan Cotton, and this was the Totally Connected podcast, brought to you by Entelar Group, the Total Connection Company. Till next time, thanks for listening. See you in a bit.